Well, I'm trying to think how I want to phrase the question. It may not be more of a question, more of like a statement that you can respond to. But you brought up a lot about morality, you know, in your lecture and everything, and also in some of the questions. But I've argued myself, and I've heard a lot of people also argue, that from a moral perspective, you can. Well, okay, I'll just start it with, like, you said that morality kind of points to God. Right, or that morality is from God or derived from God.
There's a standard beyond us to which our moral sentiments point.
Right, but a lot of people across the world, as well as myself in some ways, would say that on a moral level, looking at things, like, it would point away from God. Not because there's bad things that happen or whatever, but you can look at, like, the doctrines of religions, or, like, you know, the Abrahamic religions, for example, and just say, well, from a moral perspective, those aren't exactly very moral. That's what I would say. Genocide, you know, things like that, and, you know, a lot of troubling things. And I'm sure you've probably heard these questions before.
All right. I wanted to tackle this one. Students asking a question: how can God be moral, even if he's the moral lawgiver, if all this stuff in the Bible is so atrocious? Frank Turek's going to give a response, but I want you to stick around to the end. I'm going to show you another response by another type of scholar, biblical scholar, and he's going to actually show you how Christians view the extermination of the Canaanites. You're not going to miss it. Let's get back in the video.
But you could argue on a moral level that why you wouldn't believe in something even if it was true, or even if, you know, there was a lot of evidence presented to you that it might be true. For example, when you said, I had a lot of atheists come before me and say, would you believe in Christianity if it was true? And they said, no. I think the reason why they would say that is because on a moral level they disagree with it. So I'm just like curious about what would you say.
Well, if an atheist says that I don't believe in the God of the Bible because I think the God of the Bible is immoral, my first statement's going to be, what do you mean by immoral? Because you don't have a standard by which to judge the God of the Bible. No objective standard, it's just your subjective opinion. You just don't like the God of the Bible. But that's not a moral position, that's just your own subjective opinion. So atheists don't have a standard by which they can judge the God of the Bible or anybody else. Now, what an atheist could say is, okay,
hey, sorry, we'll get back to the video really shortly, but real quick, if you care about truth, whether it's what does the Bible really say about homosexuality or alcohol or whatever, all the way to can we actually know God just by looking at the universe, I want to encourage you to press subscribe. We're going to be coming out with more videos just like the one you're watching right now every single week, and we're diving deep to actually discover what is true. Press subscribe. Bye.
Let me not be an atheist for a second. Let me just say, if you're saying your God is a good God, why does he do these things in the Old Testament say? That's a good question for an atheist to ask. Is that the question you're asking?
Yeah, something like that. Or, like, for example, like when you mentioned the Nazis and everything, I was like, well, these people were defined as subhuman, that's why they could kill them.
Right.
But in, you know, the Old Testament, it was like, well, the Canaanites, you know, were, you know, they basically had to be like, you're massacred on like a, you know, a crazy amount because, you know, if you like read some of the Old Testament books, like they go like from like city to city, killing all the people.
All right, let's take a look at that. I got it. Okay. Is God immoral for killing the Canaanites? This is a question, a common question.
Yeah.
Let me just start out by pointing out that if there is no God, why is any so-called Old Testament atrocity wrong? This is a question I ask atheists, to which they respond, if they're honest, they'll say, okay, but it's still a problem for your worldview. The next question is this: is God arbitrary, or does he give reasons for judging people in the Old Testament? Is he arbitrary, or does he say, here's why these people need to go? The answer is, they've been doing all sorts of awful things for 400 years, and I've been patient, but now it's Judgment Day. In fact, one of the things the Canaanites were doing is they were sacrificing their babies to the molten hot metal god known as Molech. What they would do is they would heat this metal idol up, then they would put their babies on its hot arms, and the babies would literally sizzle to death. Plutarch, a Greek writer, writes of this, and he says that the drummers in the community, when this ceremony was going on, would drum louder so the parents of the kids being sacrificed wouldn't hear the screams of their own children. Now, on every college campus I go to, an atheist normally says, if there is a good God, why doesn't he stop all the evil in the world? Well, here's an instance where God steps in to stop it, and the atheists are complaining about it. Right? I mean, why complain that God doesn't stop evil, but then complain when he does? Now what they will say is, okay, God should have stopped the parents from doing this, but why did he have to wipe out all the culture, you know, the women, the children? Because it does seem to say, hey, wipe everybody out, right? There are two views on this. One is put forth by Paul Copan, a scholar down at Palm Beach University, I think it is. And he's wrote a book called Is God a Moral Monster? And he notes that if you look at the passages closely, like Deuteronomy 7, it'll say wipe everybody out. And then right after that it'll say, and then don't intermarry with them. You guys see a problem with this? How could you intermarry with a group you just wiped out? You couldn't. Copan points out that in the ancient Near East culture, this was very common to use hyperbolic language to say, annihilate these people, when it really all it meant was defeat them, push them out of the land. Okay, we do that in sports today. We annihilated you. Really? They're gone? The other team's gone? No. It's an exaggeration, all right? Now, even if Copan is wrong about that, even if these are literal commands, note this. Is God committing murder by ending lives on earth? No, why not? He's God, right? He's God. He gives life. He can take life. He can take life anytime he wants. In fact, if Christianity's true, people don't really die, they just change locations, right? They go from this life to the next life, and God can do that whenever he wants. In fact, God has the right to usher people into the next life, whether they are 2 years old or 82 years old, because people never die, they just change locations. So while it's not fair for us to take innocent life, God can do it anytime he wants. Also, one other note about this. I was at the University of Central Oklahoma. You can see this on YouTube. That's one of the questions. There was a young lady who asked a question, and she said, I can't believe in a God who would do this kind of thing. And so I said, can I ask you a question? Are you pro-abortion or pro-life? She said, oh, I'm pro-abortion. I said, let me ask you a question about that. Why is it that when God plays God in the Old Testament, when he chooses who lives and who dies, he's immoral? But when you play God here on earth and you decide who lives and who dies through abortion, that's a moral right. You see, people claim God can't be God, but they can. That's just blatantly inconsistent.
Let me start off by saying I think this is a valid question that many people have. I know I had this question when I was personally struggling with skepticism and not knowing if I believed that God was real or the Bible was true. I like Frank's response to this. Either one, maybe this is just hyperbolic language that he actually meant just to, just really beat them really bad because we see evidence that maybe they were still alive after the battles. I also really find it fascinating when he said the conversation with the girl, and I find this very true. Typically, people who, and I don't ever want to typecast anybody on here, but typically, if you're coming against and saying God is immoral because he did these things, and you are also a firm supporter of abortion, especially like really, really late-term abortion, but any abortion, it's super inconsistent to say, to judge God for doing this while you are going about killing innocent babies. At least in the story, God seems to have incentive, or at least reasons, moral reasons behind taking these people out. Now I want to show you another clip from another scholar who he's going to give you the Old Testament view, because Dr. Turek doesn't really go into this, and I've never heard anybody talk about this particular reason, especially for the Canaanites, why the Canaanites would have been driven out. And it's something that is going to be a little different, and I'm going to be honest, if you are a skeptic or an atheist or you don't believe any of this is real, this is probably not going to be helpful for you, or you're going to even find it more ridiculous. But this is what's going through the mindset of the Old Testament authors and the people who lived in that time period, and also modern day Christians. If you want to get in the mind of a modern day Christian, like, how do you reconcile? This is what we're thinking. Let's dive into the clip.
I'll tell you how they wouldn't have thought about it. They wouldn't have thought about it the way it's presented on YouTube. Okay, they wouldn't have thought about it the way it's presented on Facebook. There's a context here. It is live or be killed. But there are verbs associated not with killing in the commands to take the land. It's not all killing. In other words, God would have been happy for a number of people to just be driven out or to be dispossessed. You don't have to kill them. And you get the references there. You get some in Exodus, Deuteronomy, Joshua, again, Numbers, Joshua 3, Urash. It is a fallacy. It's untrue to say that the conquest was only about taking life. It is not. And all you need to do is read the text. Now, there are verbs of killing. There are verbs of killing in specific episodes in the conquest accounts that are used, not coincidentally, in places where Anakim, the Amorite Rephaim giant clans, are located.
So this is Dr. Heiser. He's no longer with us, but he is talking about in the conquest of Canaan, what the young man was addressing, there are different verbs that God uses in addressing the people who are living there. There's verbs of drive out, and then there are verbs of killing. The verbs of killing relate to places where, he said, the Anakim. Anakim is an ancient Hebrew word. I'm no scholar, but where it relates to giant clans. Remember David and Goliath? In the Old Testament, the biblical writers believe that demons came, or fallen angels came, interbred with women and created this race of giants. And they didn't just make them big and strong, they were inherently evil. They were a mixed breed of demonic and human flesh. And so the biblical writers, the people who were in the Old Testament, they see in these Anakim created demonic kingdoms of black magic, of dark things. This is why when Dr. Turek is talking about babies on Molech, this is the origin of that, is demon spirits mixing with women. And so this is what's going through the Canaanites' mind. And if I'm being honest, this is how I view this. I believe there are demons in the world. And if you've ever seen a demon, you know. And so these people, this people group, are infected with the demonic. Let's keep going and see what Dr. Heiser says.
I'm going to go through them. There aren't that many, but we'll just go through them. Numbers 13. Again, look at where we started back in Numbers 13, the hill country. Then you have the Canaanites who dwell by the sea. Who are they? Well, they'd be the Philistines, okay? You know. What is the hill country? The report, again, tells us about the inhabitants of the hill country, Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, again, so on and so forth. What is it? The hill country is basically, you can see in this map where it's hilly or mountainous, all the way up through here, from the south, the Negev, the hill country, all the way up through the side, through the land here, past Galilee and up into Upper Galilee. This is the hill country. All right, and then on the sea again, you're going to have some Philistine settlements. You're going to have the 5 cities of the Philistines and whatnot. But again, there's a logic to it, and hill country is a consistent focus, including the hill country in the Negev. If we look at the places where the terms Anakim and sons of Anak occur, we get several more specific geographical references. You get Hebron, Kiriath Arba, Devir, Anab, situated in the hill country. Okay, general descriptions, all the hill country of Judah. The Anakim are not said to be found in other areas, just throughout the hill country. Again, including the hill country, the Negev, you get some of that. Cities of Jericho, Jerusalem, Lachish, and Ai are in the hill country, as was Hazor. And I'm mentioning these because these are the places where the Karem commands are issued. It's not Karem everything. It's when you're in the hill country, okay, there's going to be Karem going on. And it's going to be in the places where these people live. Again, the Anakim, the sons of Anak. Not surprisingly, towns, cities that the king of Hazor sent aid to versus the Israelites are also in the hill country. So they that's a very poor decision on his part. So he's going to loop himself into this, Though the precise locations of some of the sites are unknown, the biblical narrative associates them all with the hill country. Okay, and here we go. We have one kind of map over here, then you got the topographic over here, and you can see, you just look at the place names, they're all in the hill country. Again, there's a reason for this, because of who lives in the hill country. Because of where the sons of Anak, the Anakim and the Rephaim and all, this is where they're spotted, in the hill country. Again, this is not a coincidence. It's not coincidental. It's not random. If you look at the killing verbs, harem, in the conquest accounts, Numbers, Deuteronomy, you get it with Sion and Og. They're descendants, they're the Amorite kings, and we know Og for sure is a giant. Sion is probably as well because of the association with Og. They're under Kerem. Joshua 2, Jericho in the hill country. Ai in the hill country. Joshua 10, all these places. Joshua left none remaining. They're all in the hill country. They're all places where the Anakim were spotted. In Joshua 11, Hazor, hill country. Again, this is my position. This is why I think the whole point of the way Joshua wraps up the conquest, how he defines victory, is there are no more Anakim in the land. He doesn't say there are no more humans in the land. He says, no, there are no more Anakim in the land. He doesn't even say there's no more Canaanites. He says there's no more Anakim in the land.
This point that he's making about how Joshua wraps up the conquest is important because remember, before when Israel comes up and they send spies into the land, and Joshua and Caleb come back and they got grapes the size of your head and stuff. But some of the spies, the vast majority of them, says, no, there's giants. There be giants in the land. Joshua so they wander in the desert 40 years. Joshua's like, listen, we're taking the land and we're kicking every single one of these giants out. It's a direct affront to our land that God has promised us, and it's a direct affront to Yahweh himself, this mixed demonic hybrid. Joshua takes it on himself to rid the land of the Anakim. Now, if you've made it this long in the video, kudos to you. I want to take a moment, though, just to talk to those of you who are watching who are possibly wrestling with your faith. You're a Christian right now, or maybe you were at one point in time, whatever, and you are just not convinced, or you have a lot of questions. I want to say this. It's okay to have questions. It's okay to have doubts. It's okay to watch a video like this and be like, bro, I appreciate it, but it's still not convincing. It's okay. I was exactly where you were at one point in time. Here's my petition to you. Keep looking, keep searching. Search every crevice. Keep in the conversation. Don't give up. God is real. Jesus is real. He is as real as today as he was the day he walked this planet. And he loves you. He has a plan for your life. And for the atheist and the skeptic watching who knows there's no God, he loves you too, bro. He loves you too, sis. He has a plan for your life. And I'm glad you're asking questions. I'm glad you're watching this rather than watching some sort of like Cardi B mixtape video. Maybe you're going to watch that next. I don't know. But like, at least you care about truth. Even for the skeptic or the person deconstructing, you care about truth. That's why you're here. You want to know. And I'm praying that Jesus himself would reveal himself to you. Quick story, and then I'll leave you. I was just in the Middle East a couple months ago, and I was walking around talking to some of the underground pastors in this Middle Eastern country, which I can't really name, and they were telling me stories of refugee camps in near where they're at, and how many stories were coming out of little children seeing this man in white, this vision of a man dressed in a sparkling white robe, and he would come to them. This one particular story was remarkable, and in God's honest truth, this is what he told me. He said there was two young boys, maybe 7 or 11, something around that age, and they were in a refugee camp in a tent. Mom and dad had gone missing, and they're just left alone in this tent amongst a bunch of people. They're scared, and they're alone. And they never ventured out of the tent because of the fear. And so they just sat there for days and days and days on end. Eventually, someone finds them. They calculate it to be several weeks that the boys have been alone in the tent, and they're surprised on how the boys have stayed alive for so long. And when they asked the boys, how have you lived? You didn't leave the tent? We thought this tent was empty, whatever. They said every single day, a man in a white robe would come and bring us food and water. Jesus is alive. He's real. And for those who are willing to seek for him, he will reveal himself. Thank you for sticking around. Here's some more videos right here you can check out. Some more stuff. See you guys later. Bye.